the second. India have won the test match. India have won the series. They're going to get back for two.
Hello and welcome to another episode of 81 All Out podcast. In the lead up to South Africa tour of India, the test series starting on October 2nd, we are looking back at the 96 South Africa tour of India. To talk about that series, I have a couple of guests with me today. One of them is Aftab, who's been a regular here before as well. Hi, Aftab.
Hi, Mahesh. Good to be back here.
Welcome back. And I have a new guest on 81 All Out podcast today, and that's Deepak Rao from UK. He's a software engineer from UK and a very ardent cricket fan. Hi, Deepak. Welcome to 81 All Out.
Hi, Mahesh. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Okay, let's get started with the pod. Let's start with a little bit of a personal memory of watching that series, about your life stage. What were you doing and how did you follow the series? Were you able to watch all of it? What is your recollection of that series now? Aftab, do you want to get started?
Yeah, I can. So it was a very memorable series for me, particularly because I watched at least the test matches, all of it ball by ball. And for two reasons. One, it was the first time we got cable television connected at my house, which was very ironical because my father actually was a small businessman who ran a cable business in a different locality in Delhi where my grandparents used to stay. And for the longest time, he did not get me a cable connection thinking that it's going to impact my studies, right? Typically parent thinking. But I finally managed to convince him after the Sahara Cup of 1996 because India and Pakistan were playing and I was missing out on a lot of the action since it was coming on ESPN. And then after a lot of my promises and my mother promising that I'll be diligent in my studies, we finally got a cable connection. The other reason why it's memorable is because just before the test series started and right after Titan Cup ended, I contracted chickenpox. And so what that meant was that for 3 or 4 weeks, I couldn't go to school and I was at home. So even though I was in physical discomfort, I had the luxury of lying in bed in the November and December chill of Delhi, sitting in a blanket and watching the test match series ball by ball. So I saw all the test matches, and it was also my first kind of cricket watching experience where I got to see like commentary. I heard a lot of commentary. That's kind of where I fell in love with cricket commentary and its description of the game that was happening. It's probably the first time I watched so much test cricket in succession. And so again, I think if today I have a lot of passion and love for test cricket, a lot of it goes back to that time because I actually sat down and watched what I thought was a fairly good quality test series, which went from one way to the other. And obviously India ended up winning. So that made the experience even more special. Don't think I would have been very happy if I was still sitting in bed with recovering from chickenpox and seeing India lose the test race.
Good. How about you, Deepak? What were you doing in life at the time? How old were you at the time?
So I was in my second year of engineering. That would make me 19 years old. Those days. So the most abiding memory of that series was that I listened to quite a lot of radio commentary. I mean, we had a television in college, but we had to walk quite a bit to watch TV. And being a studious kind, I wasn't into bunking lessons or anything of that sort. But the cricket was very compelling. So me and a friend of mine. Bashir. So both of us, we would actually bunk lessons and go to a little restaurant just outside the college and listen to commentary on radio. I don't think I have listened to commentary on radio since then. I've listened to TMS, but not to radio in India, radio. But that was, I still remember that 1 hour of Azharuddin Mayhem in Calcutta. Both of us just standing outside the restaurant and listening to the radio commentary, especially the 5 fours of Klusener. That was, I still remember it like yesterday. I still have very fond memories of those matches.
So you didn't watch any of the matches live, is it? On TV?
I did watch on TV, yes, but because I was going to college, I couldn't watch all of them live. I would obviously catch up on highlights. And on weekends, I say weekends, it's Saturday afternoon and Sunday the whole day. But quite a bit on radio. And I can't remember who the radio commentators were. I do very well remember the TV commentators. But I don't know who the radio commentators. I think there was Hindi and English. But but I do. But that image of me and Mushir standing outside the restaurant, listening to radio commentary with Azhar going, haywire or whatever.
Excellent. If I can ask both of you, what, like looking back at that series now, what are the first images that come back to your mind? Just readily recallable images, maybe 2 or 3 of them.
So I think for me, Azhar in Calcutta, definitely. And a very clear image I have of that, and I think Sidvi spoke about it on one of the earlier pods, is when Klusener was bowling to him and he bowls this full-length delivery on middle, and Azhar just whips it away with 1 foot in the air. Right? And Harsha Bogle says he's bowled him, and then it takes him a couple of seconds to realize it's actually gone for 4. And I remember I watched it and I was like, why is Harsha thinking he's bowled him? Because I could clearly see Azhar hitting the shot and the ball going to the boundary. And I felt, oh, he got that wrong. And I think the other image that I have is from Ahmedabad, because I honestly wasn't very sure if India had a good total to defend on the last day. But Srinath just taking all those wickets was completely unexpected, and I think it was probably the first time like an Indian fast bowler had taken 6 wickets in a home series, and it was just a complete surprise. And there was a lot of pleasure at seeing an Indian fast bowler doing so well.
Yeah, I do remember Ravi Shastri at the time, who wasn't much into cliches in commentary, and he said something like, we have seen the other fast bowlers to do to Indian batsmen, we've seen an Indian fast bowler do to the others, or something like that.
There's a very interesting video that I found on YouTube recently. Somebody uploaded it. It's so ESPN used to run these intros before Test match mornings, and it's Trevor Quirk and Ravi Shastri, I think in the second or the third Test, having a go at each other. They kept having a go at each other all through the series. I think Trevor Quirk was, to some extent, equally partisan as Shastri used to be, and Shastri wasn't very partisan then. He was just starting out on his commentary stint. And they're sitting on the stands in Eden Gardens and talking about it. And when you look at Shastri, then he looks so young. Like it's hard to recognize him back like 23 years ago compared to what he is now. So that was interesting. But yeah, I remember watching it. I'd forgotten about it till this user uploaded it on YouTube, and it brought a lot of good memories.
Yeah, so on that, because I did make a note of that, I was going to say that Quirk and Shastri, and I do remember in the Kanpur test in the first innings, Srinath. I've never seen Srinath. I had seen Srinath do the convention swing, but I think that series he started reverse swinging it, and there was this one ball that Dave Richardson was bowled, and it swung from way outside off stump, way into his onto the off bail or something. And the next morning, the conversation was Shastri telling Quirk that you can't play our fast bowlers in India. How are you going to fare in South Africa when we come there? So on and so forth. But it was famous last words.
I remember that as well. But I thought, you can make case for Quirk being a partisan anyway. But I thought that was a deliberately pitched up sort of a TV show where both were meant to pretend like they were partisan rather than them being actually hyper-partisan.
I think in the TV show they were, but even during the regular commentary, you could kind of get the sense, and I kind of got the sense even in the return tour that, Quirk was, he could not really let or hide his partisanship from coming out. Whereas Robin Jackman, on the other hand, who was, I think, Englishman first and then started spending a lot of time in South Africa, was completely different, right? His commentary was like totally from a neutral's perspective and continued to remain so till the entire time he did commentary when South Africa would be playing through the 90s. But just like Shastri sometimes can't hide his partisanship from coming out, I think Quirk was similar. So I'm not being too hard on Quirk. Commentators tend to let that slip up sometimes. He was still nice to listen to in that series, but he and Shastri couldn't control those urges, even when they were not orchestrated to do that by the broadcaster.
Fair enough. I wanted to discuss that a little later, but now that you brought up this topic, may as well head into that straight away. At that time, and subsequently also, I was just going through the wisdom reports of the series, and there tends to be this criticism of underprepared pitches and of course the regular Orientalism of poor facilities and and whatnot. In fact, I was looking for YouTube videos. I couldn't find too many. I did find one short clip of Srinath's 6-wicket spell at Ahmedabad. And towards the end, there's a very short stretch of video where Kronia is talking at the post-match conference. And he kind of makes a statement saying it's funny how poor wickets tend to produce all these absorbing contests, which is weird to start with. I mean, if it produced absorbing contests, would you call that a poor wicket? And he goes on to say that these wickets aid the spinners so much, and not only that, even against fast bowlers, you can't play the drive, and you'll have to check your shots. And to make such a complaint in a post-match conference immediately after losing a fairly tight match, you had a fairly realistic chance of winning. At that time, fitted perfectly into the template of non-subcontinent teams coming to subcontinent and complaining about these things. How do you see that now?
They did return in kind, didn't they, South Africa? Because I remember the first test in Durban. It was like a green top, and so it just seemed at the time that we were by default, the Indian wickets were very poor, and I suppose it's still the case that if it's a green seamer, it's all right, but if it's turning and all that, it's a poor wicket.
I mean, that's part of the problem. The other point that I want to kind of bring up in this is that they didn't have a problem so much as the fact that this was tailor-made for Kumble and the gang. And if you look at the top wicket takers as well, Srinath is the top wicket taker in the series. And like you mentioned, he bowled a great spell of reverse swing in Kanpur. And he got this match-winning 6-wicket haul in Ahmedabad as well. Alan Donald bowled beautifully. Klusener got an 8-4.
Yeah.
Prasad got a 5-4. I think among spinners, only Adams got a 5-4, if I'm not wrong. Even Kumble didn't have a particularly great series.
He didn't have a 5-4. I think he only bowled well towards the end in the Kanpur test where he got a 4-4. But it's interesting you brought that up because, and I was, in my notes, I was going to quote Cronier, what you mentioned about right after what he said after the Ahmedabad test. I think there was a lot of chatter, if I remember, even in the written press about, pitches being tailor-made. And it was not just, from what I recall, the South Africans talking about it. Like, I think Woolmer and Cronier were particularly not impressed with Ahmedabad, and had to do with not just the pitch, but also training facilities that they got. And there was complaints around those. And South Africa, if you remember, had traveled through a lot of the small centers in India during the Titan Cup. Like, they played at Rajkot, Faridabad, I think a couple of other small places, right? Whereas India and Australia had played games in Bangalore and Mohali. So I think some of it was kind of stemming from there as well. And this is 96, when the smaller centers didn't really have these great stadiums as they have today. And so I'm assuming a lot of it was a little bit of a pile-up over the course of a month or so. But coming back to the pitches, they were absolutely fine and fantastic when Calcutta was rolled out, because it was a bit of a featherbed and they batted first and ended up scoring a lot of runs. But the moment they came under a little bit of batting pressure, and especially when they lost the toss in the first and the third test, the conversation started switching around to pitches. And I think it was aided and abetted by a lot of chatter in the domestic Indian press, because at that point of time, there was this perception that India are tigers at home and lambs abroad. That used to be the standard quote. And people would say that, we are preparing these kind of spin-friendly pitches at home, but we have to go and play in South Africa and West Indies right away, and we don't have openers, and how are we going to play on those green-seeming tracks? And this is no way to prepare for being a good team away. And remember, we hadn't won away for so long. The only test we had won was that one test in Sri Lanka in 93, 94. And we had lost in England. At a point of time when England used to be so poor at home. So I think the South Africans were complaining, but even within the Indian press, there was this disquiet that which probably stemmed more from external factors, not necessarily because the pitches themselves were bad. I think the pitches were reasonably okay. They varied in quality across the three centers, but they produced results. And it's not that they produced results in 2 days or 3 days. I think the test matches went, in all cases, up to 4 days.
Yeah, and the wicket split was pretty well split between spinners and fast bowlers, and there were batsmen making hundreds. In fact, except for the Calcutta test, where a list of batsmen made hundreds, Otherwise, even run scoring was not particularly easy. So it produced a fairly absorbing contest throughout the series.
Absolutely, and Donald, I think, ended up being like the highest wicket taker for South Africa, if I'm not wrong, or at least he had a very good series and took wickets consistently in the 2 Test matches that he played, and he was man of the series in the Titan Cup as well. He got a lot of wickets in Titan Cup, so he ended up having like a really good tour, balled beautifully. So the pitches might have been spin friendly, but it's not that it's the spinners who dominated right from day one, or they were turning square.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that Srinath spell. Is that the first sign of? Srinath was always promising, right? It was. Deepak, you will know this coming from Karnataka. Yeah, he was promising for a long time. This was probably the moment where we felt that he was on the cusp of greatness. Although he never really attained true greatness in some ways. But was this one of his? As a fan, was this the moment you felt like Srinath is truly arrived?
Well, he did have a good series against West Indies in India, both with the bat and the ball. He was quite nasty in that Mumbai test, with Mongia saying that's the fastest he's kept ever. But that's not a very high bar anyway. But he did have a good series against West Indies in India in '94. That Mohali first came when we collapsed. But yeah, 96, that was an eye-opener. And also, if you go by his record, he's always done better in India than abroad. Most Indian fast bowlers have, except for Zahir, perhaps. They've had a better record in India because I think it was Gavaskar or Shastri who said because of the length they bowl, or because of the length that Srinath bowled, because he was always a bit short of length, which meant that in India the ball would hit the stumps, whereas it would go above elsewhere.
Yeah, I remember watching that. I watched it ball by ball because I was in bed and couldn't do much else. And it was interesting because Deepak mentioned he had a good series in 94, 95, but I hadn't really seen him swinging the ball at pace. And he was that day a genuine threat. And I think Sachin kept him on for a fairly long spell. And he ended up having a great season because he went to South Africa and did really well, and then got overbowled and eventually did his shoulder. But it was the first time that I saw him bowling, and I felt that here's an Indian fast bowler who's a genuine threat to batsmen from other teams. And in that last spell, he was moving the ball away. I think his first 2 wickets, Andrew Hudson was LBW with a sharp in-dipper. Cullinan played at an outswinger. And then the other batsman got bowled with in-dipper. So he was moving the ball both ways and reversing it a fair bit. And when you think about reverse swing on Indian pitches, Srinath's name is not the first one that comes to your mind. And I think that's why it was a very high-quality spell, which kind of swung the game towards India, when at a point of time you thought it was dicey whether they would win it or not. On that day I was expecting Kumble and Joshi to come into play, but Srinath kind of literally took the show away.
Is that, if I remember right, it was also Sachin's second series as a captain. First full series, right? He had that one-off test against Australia. Delhi. And this was pretty much the first series after that, right?
Yeah, it was. But he did captain in the Titan Cup. Not the Titan Cup, sorry. The Toronto, what was it called?
The Sahara.
The Sahara Cup, yeah. It was there.
He had got the captaincy, I think, after the England tour. And then from then on, I think Sahara Cup was probably his first assignment. And then interestingly, it was Sachin's second test as second series as captain. But if I may throw a little anecdote here, the sponsors for the series was McDowell, Vijay Mallya's company. And I can't recall if after that, we had a liquor company sponsoring cricket in India. That's probably the last time. And the only time they sponsored that a test series in India, because I think the sponsors changed after that. But that was also a unique part about the series.
And I was looking at the scoreboards, and for some reason, I've always thought this Mongia opening is a very Sachin idea. And Sachin is the kind of guy, for instance, he likes the idea of pinch hitters. He sent Srinath as a pinch hitter so often. And there's always this perception that Sachin likes these greater utilization of the secondary skill of a player. And I was looking back at it. Mongia actually opened in England as well. Mongia opened in England after, I think, Jadeja failed. So he was opening with Vikram Rathore. And he pretty much continued that into in the one-off test and here as well. And he was the only opener who was constant throughout the 3 tests. So I think first test we had Mongia opening with Manjrekar, and that proved to be his last test. Then Mongia opened with, and the funny part is Laxman made his debut in this Ahmedabad test, who later on would go on to become a makeshift opener. And in the next test, Dravid was the makeshift opener because Laxman had scored a 50 and he had to be accommodated in the 11 in the next test and stuff like that. And next game they realized, Laxman didn't play well. So they could kind of dump him and they brought in W.V. Raman to play with Mongia and push Dravid down. So this was this peak period of revolving doors of Indian opening batsmen, right?
Yeah,
and it pretty much continued for the next 3 or 4 months in overseas tours as well, South Africa and West Indies, because you had Sidhu coming in. But it's funny that you say Mongia was actually the constant, who was the one non-regular opener in that entire setup.
On that Manjrekar last test, personal thing that I think Manjrekar was the first Indian batsman that I saw. When I say I saw on TV. Playing his first test against West Indies in Mumbai. He got hit on his head by Winston Benjamin. And then this was the last test. So Manjrekar was the first batsman that I saw make his debut and also play his last test. It's been quite a few since, but I think Manjrekar was the first one who had a relatively longish career. But I don't think at the time he retired instantly. He went into commentary in the Jimmy Amarnath match, but before that he wasn't sure.
And he talks about it in his book as well, that it was just a desperate attempt by him to stay in the team that he decided to open. He wasn't 100% convinced himself, which, I think as a batsman, when you're playing a very high quality bowling attack, you're probably not going to succeed if mentally you're not there at that point of time, that, you think that you're not really up for success. He's very honest about it when he speaks in his book. And it was I liked him always as a batsman, especially in test matches, and was disappointed to see that he couldn't really work it out in that test. Dravid, you kind of always felt that they would push him up the order to open, just given how technically good he was. But I was disappointed. With the and I remember, I think at that point of time in that period, Sunny Gavaskar wrote a column in Sports Star, and he used this expression where he said, openers in India, openers are like the teeth of a hen. They're so scarce to find, because India were trying so many people in 96, 97, including Vikram Rathore, who used to score so many runs in domestic cricket, but none of them would click in international cricket.
Well, Vikram Rathore, I think, also scored the most runs in the English summer, didn't he? He failed in all the test matches, but he did well in first class.
True. And that was similar to W.V. Raman in the 90s series, right, where he had a splendid first class season, but a fairly mediocre test season.
Well, actually, I thought Vikram Rathore might have cracked it in South Africa in the third test in Johannesburg, but I think he scored like 46. He played out the new ball for the first time in his career and got out first ball to Paul Adams.
I think he was unlucky he missed out on the West Indies tour. Just as he was kind of starting to come on his own, his opportunities went away. Interestingly, talking of openers, one opener who also came in the Titan Cup, but I think played 1 or 2 games. Sujit Somasundar out of nowhere in Karnataka, right? Never played again. Opened with Tendulkar, I remember, in that Bangalore game against Australia.
My abiding memory of Sujit Somasundar in that Bangalore game was, I think he was playing Jason Gillespie. And, you sometimes when you see a batsman has played it too late, you see an inside edge go to fine leg, but he played it so late. And it was not intentional. He just got his bat right down in time, but somehow it sped to the straight boundary. I've never seen that. I've seen, batsmen getting late on ball and getting an inside edge to fine leg. But this one just went straight back. He was too late.
Yeah, we discussed this we touched upon this in one of our earlier episodes when we were discussing the 97 West Indies tour. This was also like the couple of years, this and the next, where the peak Karnataka faced in Indian cricket.
Oh, yeah. We had, I think there were 4 regular bowlers, Joshi, Kumble, Prasad and Srinath.
True.
And then there was Bharadwaj in the wings. There was Dravid, there was David Johnson, Dodda Ganesh, Sujit Somasundar. There was J. Arun Kumar, who could have been a decent opener. I think he was certainly better than Somasundar. But I think Somsundar was a Tendulkar pick, wasn't he? I mean, Tendulkar had, Saurav Ganguly.
I think he scored 100 in the Challenger Trophy, if I'm not wrong.
I don't remember that. I do remember David Johnson.
I don't recall that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember David Johnson bowling Tendulkar, and he got into the team. But
yeah.
There was a point of time in Indian cricket where if you got Tendulkar out in the Challengers, it was an automatic entry into the cricket team. Isn't that how Srinath also came to fame?
Yeah, Srinath came that way. Piyush Chawla came that way.
Piyush Chawla.
Bhuvi got not in Challenger Trophy but in Ranji Trophy. Bhuvaneshwar Kumar when made his debut, I think in the Ranji Trophy final, in which Rohit Sharma scored 200.
Mm-hmm.
No. I'm talking about the 2008 one where Rohit Sharma scores the twin hundreds.
Right.
Which was the primary point. I just wanted to bring Rohit Sharma into this.
There you go, Ramesh. You got the mention in.
This also happens to be a very curious series where despite India winning 2-1, it proved to be the last test for a bunch of people and very unlikely ones. One of them is Manjrekar. And there's Hirvani as well, Narendra Hirvani, who played, I think, 2 tests in the series, and that was that. And in fact, he bowled pretty well in the first innings of the first test, and he doesn't even get to bowl in the second innings when Srinath runs through the lineup. And the next test, nobody bowled well. South Africa dominated every one, and that's it. He was out of reckoning and never to come back.
Yeah, I do remember Ashish Kapoor playing in Kanpur, didn't he?
And that's another surprising point, which I found out just now, that was his last test as well. And,
really?
And he bowled quite well in the sense his first innings spell was 8 overs, 19 runs, 2 wickets. And his second innings spell was 13 overs, 8 maidens and 10 runs and no wicket. He was going at less than 1 run an over. And that was it. That was his last test.
Yeah,
and W. Raman played his last test in the next series.
Yeah, India had a fairly big set of players that they actually played. And now that you mentioned it, Mahesh, I when I was preparing for the pod, I kind of had 2 sets of revolving doors. One was the openers, the other was the spinners, because India had Kumble, Hirvani, Joshi, Kapoor. And Hirvani, if I remember, was unlucky because in Calcutta, I don't recall whether it was the first innings or the second innings, but there was an incident where Cullinan was batting. He was bowling to him, and Cullinan sweeps the ball. It hits his boot, goes up in the air, and gets caught at either forward shot or silly point. And the umpire didn't give it out, and they didn't go to the TV umpire at that point of time. And I think Cullinan had just started out on his innings then. Maybe it was the second innings because he goes on to score 100. But Hirvani was unlucky because he didn't get that wicket, and then he just got pasting in Calcutta. But again, he wasn't the only bowler who didn't do well in that test. Everybody else did. I wonder if it's a recurring theme in that Tendulkar captaincy era, right? You try a player for 1-2 tests, Tendulkar, I don't know, comes across as a little bit too impatient as a captain as well, and then you kind of just let the guy go, and then you never hear about these people again. So it's interesting. I didn't know actually that was Ashish Kapoor's last test as well.
This is also the debut series for Laxman, which is a fairly impressive debut, and quite an ironic twist that he got dropped after the Calcutta test, and you would hardly associate Laxman with a failure in Calcutta ever since.
That is true. And he came in at 124 for 7. Oh, no, he didn't come in at 124 for 7, but it was 124 for 7. And Kumble played one of his typical rearguard innings, didn't he? He was always there. He would just, if ever there was a definition of a fighter, all those cliche words that we hear about, Kumble was one of them. He would not get out. Yeah. And it was the beginning, it was sort of beginning of a fandom for me because I always liked Laxman. Always liked the way he played. I mean, people compare Steve-O and Marco, and then they say, Steve-O is a more gutsy player and all that. But I think Marco was just as gutsy. Some people just make it look simpler. Sometimes you want to see the hard work, the blows on the body and all that. But some batsmen are, easier on the eye, and that's not their fault.
But did Laxman carry this promise? I mean, I know Laxman came through a flood of runs in domestic cricket.
Yeah.
But was he seen as this almost Greek god kind of a batsman at that time? I don't know. I mean, for me, it seems to have evolved over time.
He was seen very promising. I won't say he was seen as freak god or the next Sachin, or even like what Shubman Gill is kind of seen of today. I think even not to that level. But I think he was seen as being very promising because he'd scored a lot of runs in domestic cricket and he had made big scores. So the expectation was, hey, somebody who can play test match cricket well because he's made big scores in domestic cricket. And I remember Harsha would always kind of talk very highly of him, maybe even the Hyderabad connection. But every time he came onto bat, Harsha would kind of mention that, oh, he's done this in the Ranji Trophy and in domestic cricket. So there was a lot of hope with him, not really like skyrocketing him or building too much of a narrative around him, but there was a lot of hope in him based on the performances that he had done in domestic cricket. And as a fan, I was very keen to see him succeed, because when you hear about good batsmen coming in from the domestic cricket, you kind of want them to stay in the team. And that was a time when Ganguly and Dravid had kind of emerged as these two new batsmen, and you kind of wanted another one to be there in the middle order with them, because you were not getting anything from the top. Like, none of the openers were working out. Talking of retirements, actually, Mahesh, I think we should probably touch upon people who did not come to that test series because they were injured. And from the South African perspective, I think Pollock couldn't play and Callis couldn't play because they were carrying injuries. And I think Adams came just for the test series and he wasn't there maybe for the Titan Cup, because I was reading online, he was also injured before. And it was interesting because we ended up seeing both, at least Pollock, play in that Durban test right away, and how good and talented he was. And this is another thing that I remember at that point of time. There used to be this talk around that India doesn't have any all-rounders and we don't produce good pace bowlers. Whereas if you looked at Pakistan and South Africa, every series there was a new pace bowler or an all-rounder coming. So, you kind of kept hearing this talk a lot amongst fans, and even, when you used to read like a lot of sports publications, like I used to read the Sports Star every week back during that day. And there used to be this talk that, we are not producing, we don't have quality all-rounders and we don't produce pacemen. And, South Africa is a team that can afford to be very competitive in India and still doesn't have, let's say, somebody like a Pollock there in the squad.
I mean, we had such a dearth of all-rounders that we were all excited by Robin Singh. So.
Yeah, he played one test.
I was excited about Sunil Joshi at one stage.
Oh, yeah, he could hit sixes, couldn't he? Sunil Joshi was very good.
Yeah. And also the debut of Klusener, which was a little bit of an unlikely debut in the sense that he was selected for the Calcutta Test in place of Fanny de Villiers, who had a fairly impressive match with the bat, if not with the ball in Ahmedabad. In fact, if not for his
67
action, they wouldn't have been in the match at all. The fact that they even took the match to the fourth is because of his batting. It's quite funny with the South African bowlers who bat well that they get dropped the next test. Simcox scored 100 and he got dropped the next test.
Was he injured or did they drop him? I don't remember now.
I thought they dropped him and picked Klusener. And
that's funny because he had a very good Titan series as well. I remember at that point of time he had a brilliant slower ball, and even Tendulkar would struggle to pick it up, and a lot of Indian batsmen struggled again. And he used to bowl these really good new ball spells with the white ball where his economy would be like less than 2. And, he would just not let you get away in the first 15 overs. He was excellent with the new ball, particularly in white ball cricket.
He's always bowled well to Sachin.
The slow off-cutter caught it short mid-wicket.
Yeah, very typical dismissal for him.
Yeah.
So do you have any memory of the build-up to Klusener's debut? In the sense, for me, it came out of nowhere almost. I saw him getting thrashed in the first innings and he comes out and takes 8 wickets in the second innings. And pretty much everything I have gotten to know of him was post that. Pretty much nothing about the build-up. At least my memory is blank. Do you guys remember anything about Zulu?
None at all. I do remember that on commentary, maybe Trevor Quirk was the one who kind of first mentioned his name as Zulu, and why he was called Zulu. So that stuck with me from that series onwards. But nothing in that first innings suggested to me that he could come back and take 8 wickets in the next one. I think batting, yes, you could kind of see that he was a bit of a hard hitter of the ball. But bowling-wise, I was actually surprised that India actually gave away so many wickets to him in the second innings.
Yeah, he didn't do much with the ball, did he? He would just go wide of the crease and ball the ball in. So it's nothing very mysterious or nothing nasty about his bowling either.
I think he used the angle of the crease well. He couldn't move the ball too much in the air or off the seam, but I think that was probably his strength, that he used to use the angles well. He would go wide, come close, and that would create a lot of perception problems for the batsman in terms of where the ball was coming from and where it was going. That was probably his strength as the bowler, his biggest strength.
I mean, I was going to get into Azhar because I thought we'll dedicate the meat of the spot for Azhar because he had a splendid series. And especially talking about the Calcutta test, in fact, most of us remember the Calcutta test more than what he did in Kanpur, which was from the narrative of match-winning innings was a massive innings. But this one came out of nowhere, and the fact that he was injured. In fact, talking of, earlier I think Deepak mentioned about taking the blows, Steve Waugh versus Mark Waugh, and typically we associate Azharuddin on the more Mark Waugh scale of things than Steve Waugh scale of things. And in this test, when he gets injured, he actually takes the ball onto the elbow, like Steve Waugh would do. Yeah. He could have, walked away from it or whatever. He literally takes the ball on his elbow, had it been done by Steve Waugh, you would have said, "Wow, gritty cricketer." But with Azharuddin, you would have probably called it poor technique. And then he walks out and then comes back and puts on a show of such dazzling brilliance. And in a way, I enjoyed Harsha Bhogle's fairly partisan sort of appreciation of it. I mean, partisan meaning from a very Hyderabadi sort of partisanship, which I always appreciate. Let's talk about Azhar. Take it ahead.
Well, Azhar growing up was my favorite cricketer. And I think up to probably 99 or 2000 when the match-fixing revelations came out, he was always my favorite cricketer. So that season after the English tour was just great. That 174 and the 109 and the second innings 52. And also that 115 at Cape Town. Just brilliant innings. And also he opened up his stance and just before the series, when he lost his captaincy, he sort of said, well, probably not in so many words, but he sort of said that he's going to be a little more carefree. So you would see some instances where you would just not get settled and just hit the ball. Later on in South Africa and West Indies, especially, I remember the one-day game in West Indies where we should have won, probably in St. Lucia, where he just... I think the asking rate was under 6 and over, but he just tried to go over the top and got caught in mid-off. But until then, it was a great season for Azhar fans.
He was, and I think he probably started after he got that blow on the arm, because when he came out after that, he came with this nothing to lose mentality, and Kumble was with him on the other side. And I think I think Deepak's right that as a fan, at least in the 90s, you tend to hold on to individual performances more strongly. And it was a performance worth holding on to because he just counter-attacked brilliantly. And I think he hits Klusener for like 5 4s in a row. Like I remember Harsha saying on the commentary, like that's 5 in a row. And, it was just like he was literally jumping up and down from his seat. There was like a lot of high-quality cricket. Like he was hitting really good shots. It was typical Azhar with his artistry and his wrists and all of those. And then I think he played a much better knock in Kanpur where the pitch was tricky, and he played it in the third innings, with the match on the line. So I think he gave this impression, and sometimes as a fan you felt that he was being very careless and cavalier, and it was hit or a miss. But I think there was method to his batting, and Manjrekar has this very endearing description of this Calcutta knock in his book, which I think goes to show Manjrekar as a cricketer. People might say a lot of things about him as a commentator, but the fact that as a cricketer he could see a lot of positives in his teammates and talk about it. So he mentions how when Azhar gets hit and he comes back and they're kind of pepping him up to go out, and after he's played this innings, Manjrekar goes to him and uses his Marathi word chabuk, which they used to use as a slang to say well played, and Azhar just looks at him and says, all the grace of Allah and grace of God that I played. So for whatever happened later on, 3-4 years later with Azhar, there used to be a lot of humility with him. And it's very well captured by Manjrekar in that episode in his book, which especially I think he's devoted a couple of pages on that, because he also had a very soft corner for Azhar, the player.
Yeah, but it was also the year when I would say he lost his sort of innocence or something, because he had that affair he subsequently married Sangeeta Bishlani, but he had that affair and all that. But prior to that, he would always be one of these very humble people. But I don't know, it's something changed after that.
Yeah, there are
there was a bit of a build-up to that, right? I mean, there were a lot of media articles about how he's become more materialistic and he buys expensive watches.
Yeah. There's this funny anecdote, two anecdotes for Azhar that I always remember in that period of 96, 97, and I digress a little bit. One is the World Cup quarterfinal against Pakistan. I remember I've spoken about it on Twitter as well. I lost power. My whole colony lost power. So we were all sitting, downstairs in the dark and listening on radio. And there were these old Indian uncles, right? Typical uncles who were saying that isko baddua lagi hai iski wife ki. Like the wife has cursed him because he's left his first wife, and that's why India is not playing well and we are losing, which is like a very random extension of a logic. And then somebody else towards the latter half of the year, I think, mentioned to me that when Azhar keeps a mustache, he plays very well, and when the moment he cleans shave, his form dips. Which was again something that I found very hard to understand. Now all my impressions of Azhar playing well, Calcutta against England, and this innings, and Cape Town, is when he had a mustache. So maybe there's a good correlation, but probably not causation.
Damn, he should have known it earlier.
Yeah, 3 months ago in England at least.
So I used to live in Delhi at that time, and we used to play cricket in a park in Janakpuri, where every Sunday we used to get a big gathering. And one of the guys was an owner of I don't know if it was Le Méridien or Park Sheraton or one of those big 5-star hotels in Delhi. And for some reason, the poor guy couldn't play where he lives, so he used to come down and play with us. And he carries this bat, which is I mean, for us used to retail bats, was this professional cricket bat. And then very casually, very nonchalantly, in one of the casual conversations, he said, "Oh, Azhar gifted me this bat." And he says, "This is the bat with which Azhar made the 100 in Calcutta." I don't know how true that is, but for the longest time, I believed it, and I batted with that bat. And I don't think I've ever gone back.
Was it a feather light SG bat?
It was a very light bat for exactly, right? Yeah, so because of that, of that reputation of the light bat, I was even more curious to test it, and the guy was generous enough to let me bat with it. And it was especially, I mean, I was in 8th class or something, so I must have been 12 or something, 11 or 12, and I'm not. I mean, when I play with the proper leather ball, I mean, proper bats to bat against the leather ball, they were very heavy, and this one was, even for me, was manageable. So, I mean, for years and years, I totally bought into the story, and I used to tell people that I played with the bat that Azharuddin scored this magnificent 100 against South Africa. And the other memory that I have of that series, and especially around Azharuddin, is the fact that, actually I've written about it somewhere else before, about my dad, and he has this split personality of coming across this as this cricket romantic versus someone who was a casual follower. So he has very precise memories of listening to radio on Sandeep Patil scoring 100 in 100 minutes in England and stuff like that. But at the same time, he has this very standard narrative about Gavaskar being a batsman who will never touch a ball outside the off stump, which is of course not true. But I've always found it a very joyful company to have him around when Azharuddin is batting. That's when you really see the cricket tragic in him come out. And he goes berserk when Azharuddin bats. He says, when in full flow, there's no batsman and he calls him bhai for some reason. Not for some reason. Most of it's a fairly common thing in Chennai where you refer to a Muslim guy as a bhai. And we couldn't control him. I think maybe Deepak, you might remember this. Did this happen on a weekday? I don't remember it at all.
Oh, it was a weekday because I was in college. So
exactly. So I was in school. So I must.
I wouldn't know. I was in bed. I was on holidays. Weekdays and weekends were same for me in that entire series.
So I came home and my dad was already there. I think for some reason he had come back from office or whatever, and he must have watched this innings. He couldn't control his excitement. When I'm coming back from school, he's just waiting to talk about it. Azharuddin played like a fantastic innings. He ripped apart South Africa. I mean, like I know India was in dire straits. We had no chance of attaining South Africa's first innings score. And I also know, because in between breaks, we do check out the score outside. And I also know we had a collapse. And in fact, in one of the breaks, I know Azharuddin was injured as well. So when I came back home, I was surprised to see Azhar and Kumble batting. And then when he narrated the story, I couldn't wait to watch the highlights. There's something about Azhar which brought out that sense of unadulterated joy of watching cricket in fairly older people, which I've not seen even with Sachin, I must admit.
Yeah, Azhar was a magician. Well, if there wasn't match fixing and all that, I would still be one of his best fans. But it was just lovely. I remember the Adelaide innings in Australia in '91. That was just out of the world. There was this chase against Australia, the game that we lost by a run. That was again, out of the blue. Him and Manjrekar scoring those runs. I mean, it was something fantastic when Azhar was on song. I totally agree with your dad. I think he's right.
I think my hypothesis is that when he was attacking, there is no prettier batsman to watch. And typically when batsmen attack, the sight is not very pretty. But he could make, a all-out attack on bowlers seem like poetry in motion. It was very pretty to watch because he would use his wrists, and it wasn't a great flourish of the bat. It wasn't great slogs. So he was a very good, easy on the eye to watch when he would be in an attacking mode. And I think that's why people kind of hold on to it very strongly. There's an element of artistry, even though he's being very aggressive in the way he's batting.
Sort of kind of extending on this, even when he's batting brutally, he's quite a sight to watch. But funnily, I found that, because my dad spoke about this and I remember watching the highlights with so much anticipation, I thought it was a very un-Azhar-like innings to start with because, there was a very clear strategy from South Africa to bowl short to him, and which is also the reason why he got injured. And even when he came back, I think Donald attempted a few bounces and he bowled quite well. And even Klusener was trying to bounce him out, right? And so the initial boundaries were a little bit of, clearing the left leg and going for the pull and hook at any cost kind of boundaries. And only after probably he got to 40 or 50 when South Africa said enough of short balls and they kind of resorted to the conventional lengths, that the true artistry of Azhar came out. There was a time when they had three fielders on the onside in the circle and he could still hit the gaps between them. But going to Kanpur innings, I remember these shots quite well. So in fact, today, just before the pod, I did search for YouTube videos and there was one video of that innings. And there were a couple of shots that he plays, very risky shots, dissecting the gap between second slip and gully or second slip and point. I think those are shots only, I have not seen anybody else play those shots. And they were fully deliberate. He was fully in control. And it was still risky. How the hell do you play that? I'll probably link that video at the end of the pod.
It's interesting that on that pitch where everybody else was struggling, he made 163, but he made it at a strike rate of 70. And the previous knock, the 100 was made, I think, of 76 or 77 balls. So at that point of time, it was like
74.
Yeah, at that point of time, it was like the fourth or the fifth fastest 100. So he was just batting on a different planet, and to be able to do a 160 at a strike rate of 70 in a third day or a third innings, just speaks to the volume of how well he was seeing the ball, but also how well and confident he was about his strokes.
So the other thing that I want to kind of touch upon is I vaguely remember the commentary from that innings, but at least in some of the short highlights, I also kind of got to relive it again. And David Hooks is just so excited about watching that innings, and pretty much all of them were excited about watching that Azhar innings, both Kanpur and Calcutta. In fact, at the end of the Calcutta innings, when he scores the 100, David Hooks says one of the greatest innings of all time. And Kanpur again pretty much gets a similar kind of reception of being a masterful knock and stuff like that. But somehow in the larger sort of scheme of things, when we are discussing about the great innings now, like sitting today over the last 50 years, neither of these get mentioned. And do you see that as a sign of how a lot of the great innings kind of get missed out over time, and only some resonate over time for a variety of reasons, not necessarily just the quality of the innings.
Yes, I think the result matters in all these lists that people prepare. So, if I was to prepare a list, I would put that 109 as well as the Adelaide innings that Azhar played in 91. So, those two, we were chasing like 360 or something, and he nearly got us there. We lost it, but because the teams lose, people don't include such innings as in the list. But I read a tweet by someone who said that if the team loses and the player and the batsman has scored well, it means that the bowling was good, wasn't it? So that should tip the scales in the batsman's favor, but it doesn't seem to.
And the Calcutta is understandable by the logic you've just mentioned. But the Kanpur was a match-winning, a series-winning innings on a wicket where nobody else looked anywhere nearly as comfortable as Azhar did, and he was holding a magic wand in his hand.
That is true. Yes.
And that barely gets mentioned in even the greatest innings played in India.
Yeah, possibly something to do with the bowling attack, I suppose, because it was Adams. Well, Adams wasn't a great spinner, was he? I don't know. Even if you had asked me to make the list, I wouldn't put. Now that you say it, I might remember it, but it would have slipped my mind as well. And also, I think South Africa were quite tired by then. They had played the Titan Cup, and as Aftab said, they had gone to these small centres. They were quite tired, and they just wanted to go home. And I remember them consternating about the Jimmy Amanat one day being an official one day as well. They didn't want that either. So I don't know. So,
yeah, to your point about innings getting lost in history, Mahesh, I think partly it's recency bias. We tend to kind of forget. I think partly it's if we haven't watched it, we don't remember it. So Deepak's very right. The Adelaide innings that Azhar played, I think, is as good of quality as the Kanpur one, if not better. Again, he was coming out of very horrible form and played this very strokeful innings. The thing with Azhar was he would be terribly out of form, and then he would come out and score this beautiful innings with a very high strike rate, right? So it wasn't as if there was a build-up to Azhar getting back in form. It would just be very instant, and it would be an innings you would remember. But I don't think that was telecast live in India, so people didn't watch it, so it doesn't get imprinted in your mind. And I think it's unfortunate that what happened with Azhar, a lot of his actual cricketing contributions on the field get discounted with all the water that flowed later on under the bridge with match fixing and all of that. But it's true, as you kind of keep going in the past, a lot of the innings that were very substantial and probably should stand out, don't, because you're just so much tied to with all the cricket happening to what's happening more recently.
Yes, so it's turned out to be a bit of an Azhar celebration pod, and we have absolutely no regrets about it. In fact, we can go on for another hour talking about Azharuddin. Perhaps we can end it with our favorite Azharuddin shot from that series to end it on a pleasant note. Aftab, do you want to go ahead? You're not allowed to pick that flick of the Yorker that Harsha Bhogle says bowled him.
Well, since that's gone, I think I would probably pick one of his pull shots. So when he hits those 5-4s in the over against Klusener, probably the first two are like pulls. And one of the pulls that he hits is very square, literally right behind the square leg umpire and goes very quickly off the bat. And the reason why I'm picking that is because all of the memories I have of Azhar, even watching him in that Adelaide test and then playing against Australia at Gabba, you don't have a visual of Azhar playing a pull or a hook that sticks in your mind. And so it's an un-Azhar shot, if I may call it. You didn't see him playing that too often. But the fact that he pulled that thing out of his armory that day and played it quite frequently, I think just speaks to the fact that he had a range as a batsman. And when he chose to use that range, he could be fairly effective with it.
Deepak.
So since that shot's out of the way, I would, if I may, I would pick an another shot. I remember Anil Kumble hitting a cover drive of Donald. Which I had not seen him do of a very fast bowler. I had seen Kumble play cover drives, but that was something else because Kumble had this very ungainly front foot movement, and then to get everything in line for a very fast ball to hit it to the covers, that stays. But sorry, it's not a Azhar shot, but that's something that I remember.
All you Kannadigas, I tell you, just cannot get out of your parochialism.
Well, better Kumble than Sujit Somasundar from Titan Cup, right?
Yeah, you should have played Arun Kumar as well. But
yeah, I'm going to stick to that sort of flicky, wristy glide to third man, which is quite a shot. I mean, perhaps I can take a gif of it and put it up or something. I still can't make sense of it. I don't think there's any other player who can play like that. He plays a couple of such shots. The one of Klusener that he hits in Kanpur is quite a special shot, and yeah, I'll probably pick that as my favorite Azhar shot in that innings. And you had plenty of choices to pick from. With that, we come to the end of this. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. I hope for those of you who have not seen Azhar bat live, younger people, please go back and check out his videos on YouTube. I mean, you can suspend your judgments on other accusations. Just watch him bat, and it's a sight for good. It's a sight straight from heaven. I'm going to plug a little bit about Rohit opening. If at all there is any spiritual hair to Azhar and Laxman in this current lineup, it's Rohit Sharma. So I hope he does well as an opener in the series against South Africa. Yes, thanks a lot, Aftab, for joining, and thanks a lot, Deepak, for joining as well. It was a pleasure to have both of you here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Deepak. Good talking to you.
Thanks, Aftab.
Cheers. See you soon. Bye-bye.
India win. He'll come back for the second. India have won the test match. India have won the series. They're going to get back for two. India